Hey guys, tonight we're drifting into the dusty, starlit plains of the Wild West, where cowboys roamed, and their stomachs growled louder than the cattle they herded. Picture yourself swaying on a creaky saddle, the horizon stretching endlessly, a faint whiff of smoke curling from a distant campfire. The life of a cowboy wasn't all gunfights and glory. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a week of their backbreaking days and meager meals. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a cowboy in the 1870s, bone-tired after wrangling steers from dawn to dusk. Your world is dirt, sweat, and the occasional howl of a coyote. Food. It's not exactly a gourmet spread. Most days, you're lucky to scarf down something hot before collapsing onto a bedroll under the stars. The cowboy's diet was built on survival, not flavor. Historical records like trail logs from the Chisholm Trail show that cowboys relied on portable, durable foods that could withstand weeks of heat and dust. Beans, bacon, and hardtack biscuits were the holy trinity of their meals. Cheap, filling, and nearly indestructible. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some cowboys swore by prairie strawberries, a jokey nickname for beans, which were so common they became a running gag. You'd hear grizzled cowhands muttering about another strawberry supper while stirring a pot over the fire. Beans were cheap, sure, but they also caused some musical evenings around the campfire. Bet you didn't expect flatulence to be a Wild West staple, did you? Historians still argue whether cowboys were malnourished or just built tough by their lean diets. Some say the lack of fresh vegetables left them vulnerable to scurvy, while others claim their hard labor burned through whatever calories they could get. Either way, you're not exactly dining at a five-star saloon. Your day starts with a tin cup of coffee so thick it could double as axle grease. Breakfast might be a biscuit, rock hard, baked weeks ago, and a strip of salty bacon if the cook's in a good mood. Lunch? Probably nothing, unless you snatch a handful of dry jerky while riding. Dinner's where the feast happens, and by feast, I mean a plate of beans with maybe a scrap of meat if the hunt went well. Imagine the monotony. You're chewing the same soggy beans night after night, while the wind whistles through the plains. No fridge, no corner store. Just a chuck wagon rattling along with a grumpy cook who's more likely to spit in the pot than season it. The chuck wagon, by the way, was the cowboy's lifeline. A mobile kitchen invented in the 1860s by Charles Goodnight. It carried flour, coffee, and barrels of beans, plus whatever game the crew could shoot. If you're lucky, the cook might toss in some wild onions or prickly pear for variety. If not, well, you're back to prairie strawberries. Let's paint the scene. You're crouched by the fire, the glow flickering on your weathered face. The cook, a guy named Rusty who smells like stale tobacco, hands you a dented tin plate. You scoop up beans with a spoon that's seen better days, and you're grateful for the warmth in your belly, even if the taste is forgettable. Somewhere in the distance, a cow moos and you chuckle, thinking it's probably mocking your dinner. Life out here is raw, unpolished, and oddly beautiful in its simplicity. You're not just eating to survive. You're fueling a way of life that's already fading as railroads creep across the frontier. But don't romanticize it too much. Your teeth ache from chewing tough jerky, and your stomach staging a revolt from all those beans. You glance at the stars, wondering if tomorrow's meal might be different. Spoiler, it won't be. The Wild West wasn't about culinary adventure. It was about endurance. And yet, there's something soothing in that rhythm, the predictability of it all. As you lean back on your bedroll, the fire crackling softly, you feel the weight of the day slipping away. The plains stretch out, vast and quiet, and you're just a small part of this endless, dusty story. You're still out here on the windswept plains. The campfires glow, your only comfort as the night wraps around you like a worn blanket. The stars above are sharp, and your stomach's already rumbling again, despite that plate of beans you just choked down. Cooking in the Wild West wasn't about finesse. It was about making do with whatever the chuck wagon carried and whatever the land coughed up. You're about to learn how cowboys turned a handful of ingredients into something edible, using nothing but a fire and a whole lot of grit. The heart of cowboy cooking was the open campfire, a flickering hub of warmth and sustenance. Historical accounts like those from the 1880s cattle drives describe cooks setting up camp each evening, digging a shallow pit for the fire, and balancing a cast iron pot or skillet over the flames. No fancy stoves, no timers, just a pile of wood, some dry cow dung if fuel was scarce, and a cook who'd rather wrestle a steer than measure ingredients. You're watching Rusty the chuckwagon cook toss a few logs into the fire, muttering about how the wind's gonna make the beans taste like ash again. He's not wrong. Everything out here tastes faintly of smoke. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some cowboys carried sourdough starters in jars, a living blob of fermented dough passed down like a family heirloom. This wasn't just bread, it was pride. A cook's reputation hung on his biscuits, and a good starter could make them fluffy enough to earn a rare grunt of approval from the crew. You'd see Rusty guarding his starter like it was gold, tucked in the chuckwagon next to the coffee beans. Lose it and you're stuck with flat, tooth-breaking biscuits. Good luck explaining that to a hungry posse. Historians still argue whether cowboy cooks were skilled chefs, or just surly babysitters for the crew's appetites. Some say men like Rusty were culinary wizards, coaxing flavor from flour and fat. Others call them glorified bean boilers who got the job because they were too ornery to herd cattle. Either way, you're at their mercy. Rusty's toolkit is basic. A Dutch oven for beans and stews, a skillet for bacon, and a coffee pot that's never clean. The fire's your oven, your stove, your everything. You learn fast that cooking's a race against the flames. Too hot, and your biscuits burn. Too cold and the beans stay crunchy. You're not eating for pleasure. You're eating to keep moving. Picture it. The fire's spitting embers and you're squatting nearby, watching Rusty stir a pot of beans with a stick he found on the ground. Hygiene. Not a priority. The beans simmer for hours, soaking up whatever fat drips from the bacon he fried earlier. If you're lucky, he'll toss in some dried chilies or wild garlic he stumbled across. If not, it's just beans, plain and starchy, with a texture that's somehow both mushy and gritty. You joke to the guy next to you. Think Rusty's hiding a steak in that wagon? He snorts, knowing full well the closest thing to steak is the jerky in your pocket, tougher than your saddle. The coffee's another story. It's brewed strong enough to wake a hibernating bear. Boiled in a pot with grounds that never get dumped, just topped off day after day. You sip it from a tin cup, wincing as it burns your tongue and leaves a gritty aftertaste. It's less a beverage and more a survival tool, keeping you alert for the night watch. Sometimes, Rusty might try something fancy like frying dough in bacon grease for a crude donut. You bite into one and it's greasy, chewy, and oddly glorious after days of biscuits. You whisper, "Rusty, you're a genius," and he growls, "Shut up and eat." The process is mesmerizing in its simplicity. You're drawn to the fire's rhythm, the crackle of wood, the hiss of fat, the slow bubble of the bean pot. There's no recipe book, no measuring cups. Rusty cooks by instinct, squinting at the flames like they're telling him secrets. You're starting to see why cowboys romanticize this life, even if the food was forgettable. It's not about the taste. It's about the ritual, the shared exhaustion, the fleeting warmth of a meal under the stars. As you scrape the last beans from your plate, you lean back, the fire's glow softening the edges of the world. Sleep's calling, but you're not quite ready to let go of this moment. The fire's dying down now, casting long shadows across the campsite as you huddle closer to its fading warmth. Your tin plate's empty, but your stomach's still grumbling, demanding something more than Rusty's endless beans. You're starting to wonder what exactly kept cowboys going day after day on this relentless trail. The answer lies in a handful of staple foods: beans, bacon, and biscuits, that were the backbone of every cowboy's diet. These weren't just meals, they were the fuel for a grueling life under the open sky. Let's start with beans, the undisputed king of the chuckwagon. Historical records from 19th century cattle drives, like those along the Goodnight-Loving Trail, show beans were a constant because they were cheap, lightweight, and lasted forever in a sack. Pinto beans were the go-to, boiled into a thick starchy mush that stuck to your ribs. You're scooping them up now, the texture somewhere between soup and gravel, and you can't help but smirk at the nickname prairie strawberries you heard last night. It's funny until you realize you'll be eating them again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. Here's a quirky tidbit. Cowboys sometimes ate son-of-a-gun stew, a dubious mix of beans, scraps of meat, and whatever else Rusty could scrounge, think cow tongue or worse. It was less a recipe and more a dare, tossed together when supplies ran low. You eye the pot suspiciously, wondering if tonight's beans are hiding something chewier. Rusty catches your look and cackles, Eat it or starve, kid. You're not sure if he's joking, and honestly, you don't want to know. Historians still argue whether cowboys thrived on this diet or just survived it. Some claim the high-protein beans and bacon gave them enough energy for 16-hour days. Others point to accounts of cowboys with rotting teeth and weak bones from vitamin deficiencies. You're feeling it already, your jaw's sore from chewing, and you're craving something green, anything that doesn't taste like smoke or salt. But out here, fresh food is a fantasy. Your staples are built for the long haul, not for flavor. Bacon's the next hero or villain depending on your mood. It's not the crispy strips you're used to. This is salt-cured slab bacon, fatty and tough, fried until it's somewhere between leather and charcoal. You gnaw on a piece, the grease coating your fingers, and it's salty enough to make your eyes water. The chuck wagon carries it in barrels, and it's a lifeline, calorie-dense and nearly spoilage-proof. You're grateful for the energy, but you're also pretty sure this stuff could survive the apocalypse. Then there's the biscuit, the cowboys' answer to bread. Made from flour, water, and a pinch of baking soda. These are dense, dry, and about as exciting as a rock. If Rusty's sourdough starter is fresh, they might be vaguely fluffy. If not, they're hardtack's grumpy cousin. You dunk one in your coffee to soften it, praying you don't chip a tooth. A good biscuit is a small victory. A reminder that even out here, there's room for a little comfort. You chuckle, thinking how your modern self would probably trade a horse for a bagel right now. These staples, beans, bacon, biscuits, aren't just food. They're a rhythm, a routine that holds the crew together. You're sitting cross-legged by the fire, watching the others eat in silence, their faces lit by the glow. There's a strange camaraderie in this shared monotony, like you're all in on the same bad joke. You lean over to the cowboy next to you, whispering, "Bet we could sell these beans as cement mix." He grins, spitting out a bit of biscuit. Rusty overhears and snaps, "Keep talking. And you're cooking tomorrow." You all laugh, the sound swallowed by the vast, quiet plains. The simplicity of it all is oddly soothing. No menus, no choices, just the same reliable trio night after night. You're starting to understand the cowboy's world. It's not about variety, it's about endurance. The fire crackles softly, and you scrape the last bit of beans from your plate, feeling the weight of the day settle into your bones. The stars are brighter now, the air cooler, and you're sinking deeper into the moment, the endless cycle of eat, work, sleep. It's not glamorous, but it's real, and for tonight, it's enough. The campfire's embers are glowing faintly now, and you're sprawled on a blanket, staring up at the endless Wyoming sky, your belly full of beans that are already plotting their revenge. You're thinking about those Wild West saloons you've seen in old movies. Rowdy places with swinging doors and whiskey flowing like water. But tonight, you're not chasing drinks. You're curious about what food those saloons served up when cowboys like you rolled into town, dusty and starving after weeks on the trail. Saloons weren't just for booze, though that's what Hollywood loves to show. Historical accounts from towns like Dodge City in the 1870s reveal that many saloons doubled as eateries, offering meals to travelers, gamblers, and cowhands with a few coins to spare. You push through the creaky doors of a place called the Long Branch, the air thick with tobacco smoke and the clink of glasses. The menu's not exactly Michelin star worthy, but it's a step up from Rusty's chuck wagon. You're handed a plate of stew, probably beef, maybe venison, laden with potatoes and onions, the first vegetables you've seen in weeks. It's warm, savory, and feels like a hug from someone who doesn't like you much but tries anyway. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some saloons served free lunch to lure in drinkers, a spread of salty snacks like pickles, salted fish, or stale bread to keep you chugging beer. You grab a pickled egg from a jar on the bar, and it's so vinegary your face puckers like you just kissed a cactus. The catch? Nothing's really free, you're expected to buy a drink, and that egg's basically a trap to make you thirsty. You mutter, "Sneaky bastards." And the bartender smirks, sliding you a beer you didn't ask for. Historians still argue whether saloon food was a genuine attempt at hospitality, or just a clever business ploy. Some say owners cared about feeding hungry travelers. Others insist it was all about boosting liquor sales. Either way, you're grateful for the change of pace. The stew's hearty, thickened with flour and spiced with whatever the cook had on hand. Maybe pepper, maybe nothing. If you're lucky, there's cornbread on the side, crumbly and sweet. A far cry from Rusty's jaw-breaking biscuits. You tear into it, savoring the buttery texture. And for a moment, you feel almost civilized. But don't get too cozy. Saloon food varied wildly by town and budget. In a rough joint you might get slumgullion, a watery stew of mystery meat and sadness. In fancier spots like in San Francisco you could score oysters or even a roasted chicken if you had the cash. You're in a middle-of-the-road place, so it's stew and cornbread, maybe some canned peaches for dessert if the supply train came through. You spoon up the peaches, their syrupy sweetness cutting through the salt of the meal, and you can't help but grin. Rusty could learn a thing or two, you say to the guy next to you who's too busy eyeing the poker table to care. The saloon's buzzing, card games, laughter. A piano player hammering out a tune that's more enthusiasm than skill. You're soaking it in, the warmth of the room, the clatter of plates, the rare chance to eat without a cloud of trail dust seasoning your food. But it's not all comfort. The stew's greasy, the cornbread stale by tomorrow, and you're pretty sure that pickled egg is staging a revolt in your gut. Saloons were a break from the trail, but they weren't exactly health spas. You lean back in your chair, the wood creaking, and sip your beer, watching the room through half-closed eyes. This is the Wild West at its core. A mix of rough edges and fleeting pleasures. You're not sure if it's the food or the atmosphere, but you're starting to relax, the noise of the saloon fading into a soft hum. The firelight from a lantern flickers on the wall, and you feel the weight of the trail slipping away, just for tonight. You take one last bite of cornbread, savoring the crumbs, and let the moment linger, knowing tomorrow it's back to beans and bacon. You're back on the trail now. The saloon's warm glow a distant memory as you sway in the saddle, the endless plains stretching before you. The sun's beating down, and your mouth's dry as the dust kicking up around your horse's hooves. After that brief taste of saloon stew, you're back to the reality of trail food, tough, portable rations that keep you alive but make you question your life choices. Eating on a cattle drive is a battle against monotony, spoilage, and the sheer exhaustion of moving 1,000 head of cattle across miles of nothing. Cattle drives like those on the Chisholm Trail in the 1870s were grueling, often lasting months, and historical logs show food was a constant challenge. The chuck wagon was your only lifeline, but it couldn't carry fresh meat or vegetables for long. You're relying on preserved foods, dried, salted, or canned goods that could survive the jolting wagon and relentless heat. Jerky's your best friend now. A strip of beef so tough it's practically a workout for your jaw. You pull a piece from your saddlebag, gnawing on it while squinting at the horizon, and you're pretty sure it's mocking your hunger. It's salty, chewy, and about as appetizing as your boot, but it keeps you going. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some cowboys carried pemmican, a Native American-inspired mix of dried meat, fat, and berries, packed into small dense cakes. It was a survival food like the Wild West version of an energy bar, but you're not exactly savoring it. You try a bite, and it's greasy, grainy, and tastes like someone's idea of a cruel prank. You mutter, "Who thought this was a good idea?" And the cowboy riding next to you chuckles, saying, "Beats starving." Barely. Historians still argue whether trail food was enough to sustain the cowboys' brutal workload, or if it slowly wore them down. Some point to accounts of cowboys staying lean and wiry on jerky and biscuits. Others note frequent complaints of hunger and fatigue in trail diaries. You're feeling the strain already, your stomach's growling, and lunch is just another piece of jerky or a stale biscuit from breakfast. The chuck wagon's a few miles back, and you won't see it until camp tonight. You're starting to dream of that saloon cornbread, but out here it's just you, your horse, and a pocketful of dried sadness. Water's another problem. You've got a canteen, but it's half empty, and the next stream might be hours away. When you do find water, it's often muddy, and you're sharing it with the cattle. Coffee's your only real drink, brewed at camp and carried in a flask if you're lucky. You take a swig, wincing at the bitter, gritty taste, and joke to yourself, "This is why cowboys never smiled in photos." It's not just the coffee, it's the whole deal. Your rations are designed to last, not to please. Dried apples or prunes show up sometimes, a rare treat to keep scurvy at bay, but they're leathery and taste like regret. The chuck wagon's limitations shape everything. Rusty can't haul much beyond the basics. Flour, beans, bacon, coffee, and a few cans of tomatoes or peaches if the budget allows. Fresh game, rabbit, deer, or antelope, might spice things up, but hunting takes time and the herd doesn't wait. You're lucky if you get a thin stew with a scrap of meat once a week. Most days it's biscuits and jerky on the move, eaten while dodging flies and praying the wind doesn't blow dust into your mouth. You catch a whiff of your own sweat and laugh, thinking, At least the food's not the worst smell out here. The rhythm of the trail is relentless, but there's a strange comfort in its predictability. You chew your jerky, the repetitive motion almost meditative, and let your mind wander. The cattle low in the distance, the creak of your saddle keeps time, and the vastness of the plains feels oddly soothing. You're hungry, sure, but you're alive, moving forward, part of something bigger than yourself. Tonight, you'll reach camp and Rusty's beans will be waiting. Same as always, same as ever. You lean back in the saddle, the sun dipping low, and let the day's weight settle, ready for the fire's glow and another night under the stars. The sun's dipping below the horizon now, painting the plains in shades of gold and shadow as you guide the herd toward tonight's campsite. Your stomach's a nagging companion, still unimpressed by that strip of jerky you choked down hours ago. Out here, food is scarce and predictable, but it wasn't just cowboys like you shaping the menu. Native American influences wove their way into the cowboys' diet, adding flavors and survival tricks that made life on the trail a little less miserable. You're about to discover how these cultures crossed paths in the cookpot. Historical records from the 19th century, particularly from interactions along trails like the Santa Fe, show that cowboys often traded with or learned from native tribes, Comanche, Apache, Cheyenne, whose knowledge of the land was unmatched. They knew which plants were edible, how to preserve meat, and how to stretch limited resources. You're riding past a patch of wild grasses, and you notice a cowboy up ahead, a guy named Tom who's half Cherokee, pointing out a cluster of cattail roots. He says they can be roasted or ground into flour. You raise an eyebrow, thinking, flour from swamp weeds? Sure, Tom. But you're curious and hunger makes you open-minded. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some cowboys adopted pinole, a Native American staple of ground, roasted corn mixed with spices or sugar, carried in a pouch for quick energy. You try a pinch from Tom's stash, and it's nutty, gritty, and weirdly satisfying, like a trail mix that forgot to invite the fun ingredients. You joke, this stuff could wake a dead horse, and Tom grins, saying, keep eating jerky and you'll need it. It's not gourmet, but it's light, lasts forever, and beats gnawing on another biscuit. Historians still argue whether native influences were a major part of cowboy cuisine, or just a footnote. Some say tribes taught cowboys essential survival skills, like drying meat or foraging. Others argue most cowhands stuck to their beans and bacon, too stubborn or skeptical to try Indian food. You're seeing it firsthand, though. At camp tonight, Rusty's experimenting, tossing some dried corn from a recent trade into the bean pot. The result is a thicker, earthier stew, and you're surprised to find yourself scraping the plate clean. It's not just the taste, it's the idea that someone somewhere figured this out long before chuck wagons rolled through. Native contributions went beyond ingredients. You learn from Tom that tribes like the Navajo used pemmican, that meat-fatberry mix you tried last week, to survive lean winters. Cowboys borrowed it for long drives, especially when game was scarce. You're still not a fan, too greasy, too weird, but you respect its staying power. Tribes also introduce ways to use local plants, like mesquite pods ground into a sweet meal or yucca fruit boiled for a starchy side. You munch on a piece of roasted yucca, and it's bland but filling, like a potato that gave up on its dreams. You whisper, Rusty, you stealing recipes now? He grumbles, eat or shut up. But you catch a flicker of pride in his eye. The exchange wasn't one-sided. Cowboys shared their coffee and flour, and some tribes took to biscuits or bacon when trade allowed. You're sitting by the fire, watching the crew swap stories with a couple of Kiowa traders who stopped by camp. They're munching on Rusty's biscuits, and you can't help but laugh when one grimaces and says, hard as my saddle. You toss him a piece of pinole and he nods like it's a fair trade. These moments feel rare. A fleeting connection in a world where mistrust often ruled. The fire's crackling and you're savoring this strange, corn-laced stew. The stars above sharp and countless. Native knowledge gave cowboys like you a fighting chance out here, turning the plains into more than just a barren stretch. It's humbling, knowing your survival owes something to people who've been reading this land for centuries. You lean back, the warmth of the meal settling in, and let the night's quiet wrap around you. The herd's lowing softly, Tom's still talking about cattails, and you're drifting, carried by the rhythm of the trail and the faint, unfamiliar taste of something new. The campfire's a soft glow now, its embers pulsing like a heartbeat as you lean against your saddle, the night air cool on your face. The herd settled, their low moans blending with the rustle of grass in the breeze. After weeks of beans and jerky, you're starting to fantasize about food that doesn't taste like survival. Every once in a while, a cowboy got a taste of something special: luxury foods, rare treats that felt like a glimpse of civilization. You're about to uncover what passed for fancy in the Wild West, and trust me, it's not exactly champagne and caviar. Historical records from supply logs in towns like Abilene in the 1870s show that canned goods were the height of luxury on the trail or in saloons. Canned peaches, tomatoes, or even oysters were prized, hauled in by freight wagons or early railroads. You're at camp tonight, and Rusty's in a rare good mood, cracking open a can of peaches from a trade in Dodge City. The syrupy smell hits you like a dream, and you're handed a slice on your tin plate. It's sweet, juicy, a shock after days of salt and starch. You savor it slowly, letting the flavor linger, and mutter, "This is why we don't quit." The crew chuckles, but they're all guarding their own slices like hawks. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some cowboys got hooked on canned sardines, a bizarre delicacy shipped from coastal cities. You try one and it's oily, fishy, and so salty it makes your tongue curl. You spit it out, saying, "Who eats this on purpose?" Tom, the half-Cherokee guy from last night, laughs and says, "Rich folks with no taste." He's not wrong. Sardines were a status symbol, proof you could afford something fancier than bacon. But out here, they're just another weird thing to choke down. Historians still argue whether these luxury foods were a meaningful part of cowboy diets or just occasional splurges. Some say canned goods boosted morale, giving cowhands something to look forward to. Others argue they were too expensive and rare to matter much. You're feeling the boost, though. That peach slice was a small miracle, a reminder of a world beyond the trail. But the reality is luxury's fleeting. Most nights it's back to beans, and canned goods were a treat maybe once a month, if you were lucky and the chuckwagon's budget held up. In saloons, the fancy got fancier. If you had enough coin, you might score a plate of roast beef or even a slice of pie, apple if the cook was feeling ambitious. You're remembering that saloon in Dodge where you saw a guy eating a slice of pie with a fork like he was some kind of king. You were stuck with stew, but you stared at that pie, crust flaky and golden, and swore you'd save up for one next time. Spoiler, you didn't. A cowboy's pay was about $30 a month, and most of it went to whiskey or gear, not dessert. Even sugar was a luxury. You're used to coffee black as tar, but sometimes Rusty'd toss a spoonful of molasses or brown sugar into the pot, turning it into something almost drinkable. Tonight he stirred some molasses into the beans, and it's a game changer: sweet, smoky, almost decadent. You scoop up a bite and say, "Rusty, you hiding a chef's hat in that wagon?" He grumbles, "Eat it before I change my mind," but you catch him smirking. It's moments like this that make the trail bearable. Tiny bursts of sweetness in a life of grit. The rarity of these treats made them mythic. You hear stories from other cowhands about mythical hauls, barrels of canned fruit, a whole smoked ham, even chocolate bars in some far-off town. You're skeptical, but you listen, the firelight flickering on faces lost in the tale. It's not just about the food. It's about hope, the idea that something better's out there. You lean back, licking the last bit of peach syrup from your spoon, and let the stars blur above you. The night's quiet, the air heavy with the promise of sleep, and for once, your stomach's not complaining. You're holding on to this moment, knowing tomorrow it's back to the same old beans. The night's settled in deep now, the campfire a faint flicker as you pull your hat low, the plain stretching dark and endless around you. Your stomach's still buzzing from that rare peach slice, but the glow's fading, and you're back to reality. Days of repetitive meals that keep you alive but leave you dreaming of anything else. You're starting to wonder how cowboys stayed healthy, or if they did at all on this diet of beans, bacon, and grit. Let's dig into the nutritional side of life on the trail, where every bite was a gamble between survival and slow decline. Historical accounts like diaries from 1870s cattle drives show cowboys ate a diet heavy on protein and carbs but desperately short on vitamins. Beans and bacon gave you enough calories for 16-hour days of herding, but fresh fruits and vegetables were almost non-existent. You're feeling it. Your gums are tender, your energy's sluggish, and you're pretty sure your last biscuit left a permanent dent in your morale. Scurvy was a real threat, with some cowboys reporting bleeding gums or loose teeth after months without greens. Rusty might toss in dried apples or wild onions when he can, but it's not enough to keep you thriving. You're surviving barely, and you're starting to envy the cattle for their grass. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some cowboys chewed tobacco not just for kicks but to mask hunger or trick their bodies into feeling full. You try a pinch and it's bitter acrid like licking a barn floor. You spit it out, coughing, and mutter, "I'd rather eat Rusty's biscuits." Tom, lounging nearby, laughs and says, "Give it a week, you'll be begging for it." He's probably right. Hunger out here makes you desperate, and anything that dulls the ache feels like a win, even if it tastes like regret. Historians still argue whether cowboys were toughened by their lean diets or slowly broken by them. Some point to their endurance, claiming the high-protein meals built wiry, resilient men. Others cite medical reports of malnutrition, with cowboys suffering from weak bones or night blindness from vitamin A shortages. You're leaning toward the broken side. Your legs ache after long rides and you're craving something, anything that crunches or grows on a tree. The chuck wagon's a miracle, but it's no grocery store. You're stuck with what it carries, and that's mostly starch and salt. Water's another issue. You're sipping from a canteen that's half mud, and clean streams are rare. Dehydration's a constant shadow, especially when the sun's roasting you like one of Rusty's overdone biscuits. Coffee keeps you awake, but it's not exactly hydrating, and you're pretty sure it's stripping years off your life. You take a swig, wincing at the gritty aftertaste, and joke, "This stuff's why we're all so cheerful." The crew snickers, but you're all feeling the same slow grind. Too much work, too little nourishment. The lack of variety messes with your head, too. You're eating for fuel, not joy, and the monotony's numbing. Beans every night, bacon every morning, biscuits that could double as doorstops. It's a cycle that makes you forget what flavor even means. Sometimes Rusty'll boil up a thin soup with a scrap of game, and it's like a holiday. You slurp it down, savoring the faint hint of rabbit or sage. And for a moment you're human again. But those moments are rare. Most days you're chewing through the same old rations, your body begging for something fresh while your mind's too tired to care. It's not all doom, though. The simplicity has a strange comfort, like a lullaby you didn't ask for. You're sitting by the fire, scraping the last beans from your plate, the rhythm of the trail sinking into your bones. The stars are sharp, the air cool, and you're part of this vast, unchanging world. You lean back, your body heavy, and let the quiet take over. You're not healthy by any modern standard, but you're here, still moving, still alive. The fire pops softly, and you're drifting, the weight of hunger and exhaustion pulling you toward sleep like an old friend. The campfire's barely a whisper now, just a few stubborn embers glowing against the vast, inky sprawl of the plains. You're sprawled on your bedroll, one arm behind your head, staring at the stars as the night's chill seeps through your jacket. After weeks of chewing through beans and jerky, you're starting to see why those Hollywood westerns made cowboy life look so glamorous. Steak sizzling, whiskey flowing, plates piled high. But the real Wild West? It was more about survival than swagger. You're ready to peel back the myths and uncover what cowboys actually ate. No silver screen filter needed. Hollywood loves to paint cowboys as rugged heroes feasting on hearty slabs of beef after a hard day's ride. Historical records like trail logs from the 1880s tell a different story. Fresh beef was a rare treat, usually only available if a cow got injured or a rancher butchered one nearby. You're picturing that saloon scene from some old flick, where the heroes got a juicy steak and a side of mashed potatoes. In reality, you're lucky to get a thin slice of tough, stringy beef once a month. Most of your protein's coming from bacon or jerky, and you're still picking bits of last night's beans out of your teeth. You chuckle, thinking, Hollywood'd fire Rusty for serving this slop. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some movies show cowboys chowing down on chili con carne like it was a trail staple. But chili as we know it wasn't common until the late 19th century, mostly in Texas towns. You try a bowl of Rusty's so-called chili, and it's just beans with a pinch of dried pepper that makes your eyes water. You cough, saying, "This is why we stick to biscuits." Tom, the half-Cherokee cowboy, smirks and says, "Call that chili? My grandma's soup had more kick." It's a far cry from the spicy, meaty bowls you see in westerns, and you're starting to suspect movie makers never spent a day on a cattle drive. Historians still argue whether these myths were born from romanticized dime novels or early films exaggerating cowboy life. Some say the stories captured the spirit of adventure. Others argue they buried the gritty truth under a pile of cinematic nonsense. You're leaning toward the latter. The real cowboy diet was monotonous, built for endurance, not Instagram-worthy plates.